I read this back a couple of years ago and I was like, it's so cool to look back at your evolution of thinking from just being a consumer in this life. I was working at a company and I was shopping 3 times a week. I was a consumer and I wasn't spending my life creating anything new in any capacity. And I really just wanted to flip that switch from taking to giving, consuming to producing. And I guess it was 2017, 2018 that I really began to have that mindset shift. And then fast forward a couple of years when this rental came about, it just made so much sense to me. It was like a right time, right place for the market, for myself. And then I started working on this business. Sort of 6 months I was at my old company and start business on the side. That was very mental. It was crazy, but it's incredible when you're so married to an idea, you have an unlimited supply of energy within, and funny, you just make it work. So you work on the weekends, you work at night, you just make that side hustle come true, I guess.
Thank you so much for clicking on this episode of The Millennial Entrepreneur. The ambition of the podcast is to show relatable stories from young entrepreneurs doing some incredible things to inspire the next generation, including you listening wherever you are. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years and the ambition has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the scale of where we want to go. We want to bring on bigger guests for you guys to show more and more relatable and inspiring stories from young entrepreneurs across the world. The majority of you guys listening haven't subscribed to the podcast yet. All you have to do is click that subscribe button wherever you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now allow us to bring on bigger guests and ask the questions to them that you really want to hear. And it really is that simple. So thank you again for clicking on the podcast and enjoy the episode. Georgie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I wanted to have you on for a long time, so I'm really, massive pleasure to have you on. It'd be amazing to hear a bit about you before we jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. What would you like to know? We begin. How far back would you like to go?
I guess everyone in their life has got a turning point. Yeah. I know we're getting very deep very quickly.
I'm into it. I want to go straight.
That's what we do on the podcast. We just go very deep very quickly. So when was that turning point in your life, would you say? And then we can start from there.
Turning point, to clarify, to become an entrepreneur, or what specifically?
Or just be more certain about yourself as an individual.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that is very clear to me. So I grew up in South Africa and I was very sporty at school. I was kind of good at academics, but I didn't ever really apply myself. I prioritized a more well-rounded, wholesome education. Then I went to university in Cape Town, and after I graduated with a psychology and business degree, I moved to London. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I would be, how I wanted to spend my time. All I knew was that someday I would be doing something for myself and I wanted to change a system in some way. I didn't know what that was going to be. It was very pie in the sky. But essentially, my second job I ever got in London was at a trend forecasting company called WGSN. And I started as an intern. I didn't even know trend forecasting and consumer insights was an industry or a business that I could get involved in. But when one of my friends told me about this internship that was opening up there, and something all of a sudden just clicked. I was like, wow, I'm interested in fashion. I love psychology. I love consumer behavior. This just makes so much sense. I love thinking about the future and developing future solutions and tackling problems of today. And I didn't have very much experience in my career, but when I heard about this business, something in me just clicked and I was like, wow, this makes sense. This feels like I'm going to be where I need to be at the right time, at the right place. And I guess that was the first moment in my career where all of my interests came together in one business, which was really satisfying. I sort of moved to London just being like, I'm going to try out a whole lot of jobs until I find something that I really like. That was my attitude. And luckily, this was the second company I applied for and started working for. And I started as an intern, and it was absolutely fascinating. So basically, this is an information services business that sells brands, consumer brands, fashion brands, information on future trends and how to adapt them to the future consumer. And I absolutely loved it. I worked my way up to the consulting team over a period of about 4 years. I moved about 4 times within those 4 years within the business because I was like, okay, this is fun, but what's next? Like I want to sink my teeth in deeper to this business. I want to learn more. I want to be more involved with projects, more involved with clients. I guess I've always been very hungry and impatient, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so I didn't ever stay in one role longer than like a year, I'd say. So I eventually worked my way up into the consultancy, and there it was really interesting. We were working on such cool projects. At the time I was like, wow, this is my dream job. I can't believe I've landed here. I remember sitting in the boardroom, which was this really cool office looking Piccadilly, and thinking, this little girl from Durban, South Africa, like, wow, what a cool job. I loved it so much. And so the types of projects we would work on is like, what is the future of personal mobility and what does that look like? And what is the next luxury fashion handbag? What does that look like? What are the future of accessories and the future of like consumer behavior and how they're living and breathing and moving in space?
Yeah.
And I loved the big ideas and the blue sky thinking. Like that's what I'm really, really passionate about. But at the same time, I was working very closely with some fashion brands that I had to churn out new product for them on like a monthly basis. And essentially it was this constant churn of product and fashion and playing into this linear fashion system that made me feel really uncomfortable. And something really didn't sit well.
The whole like fast fashion industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just a cog in the machine. So I was contributing to fast fashion being churned out. I was the trend forecasting consultant that was implementing new trends on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And I had this overwhelming sense of eco-anxiety where I would pull my colleagues aside into meeting rooms and be like, how can we continue to perpetuate this? Surely we need to do something. Well, I was just like, I don't know about you guys, but I want to do something about this.
Yeah.
And when we were looking to our future consumer and future business models, being a forecasting agency, we were looking at how the future of fashion very much lies in circularity, so rental, resale, repair, all of the re's, just really flipping the fashion industry from a linear one to a circular one. And I had a light bulb moment, and this was certainly the turning point, or when I knew that this was the right thing to do, was one of the senior directors was just talking about rental, and there were no fashion rental platforms in the UK that were dealing directly with businesses. So there were some peer-to-peer platforms, but nobody was helping brands change their business models and start new business models and get into the circular fashion economy.
Yeah, it was very much like you as an owner, as an individual, can rent your existing clothes with other people.
Yeah.
It wasn't like business at all. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. But I think back to your question on the personal turning point, in these 4 years that I was working at this agency, as a young, very early 20-something-year-old, I started out my career moving to London, having fun, kind of coasting along.
Yeah.
Kind of, just having a good time and taking business opportunities as and when they came to me. But I always felt like I wanted to contribute more, and I always had something more to give. And I look back at a diary entry that I wrote in like 2017 or something, and it was like, this year is a year for creation, not consumption. So, and I read this back a couple of years ago, and I was like, it's so cool to look back at your evolution of thinking from just being a consumer in this life. I was working at a company and I was shopping 3 times a week, and I was just like, I was a consumer, and I wasn't spending my life creating anything new in any capacity. And I really just wanted to flip that switch from taking to giving, consuming to producing. And I guess it was a 2017, 2018 that I really began to have that mindset shift. And then fast forward a couple of years when this rental came about, it just made so much sense to me. It was like a time, right place for the market, for myself. And then I started working on this business. Sort of 6 months I was at my old company and start business on the side. So that was very mental. It was crazy, but it's incredible when you have when you're so married to an idea, you have an unlimited supply of energy within, and funny, you just make it work. So you work on the weekends, you work at night, you just make that side hustle come true, I guess.
Did you never think about sort of using that idea and implementing it within the job that you already had? Or was it something, because you said they spoke about something like that, was it nothing that they wanted to take forward with, say, existing clients or anything like that?
Yeah, so clients were implementing it, but what I wanted to do was create a marketplace where you could get multiple brands and serve multiple types of customers. And I just thought it would really fast forward the adoption of circular fashion if I could just go out there and do it myself, rather than trying to convince 20 people in a large organization that they need to implement a new business model. Why not just go out and do it yourself?
When was so you started it 6 months, you said you were still at the company. At what point did you decide, like, no, I want to do this like full time?
So I left the business when I launched Rotaro. So on the day that it launched, on the 13th of November, 2019.
Oh, damn, you know the exact date.
I know the dates. That's when we launched.
Was it a scary jump? Was it okay? How did it feel?
It felt so right. I can't explain it to you. It felt so natural. It truly, down to my gut, it felt like the right thing to be doing. And I didn't look back. I haven't looked back once, not even for a split second.
That's really interesting. So we got where the idea came from. So you wanted a business sort of rental platform for fashion. What within those 6 months, what were you actually doing day to day when it came to? I know you'll be working as well, but what were you doing in order to validate, in order to see that this is something that brands want, in order to get some traction? What were you kind of doing in order to sort of test this?
Yeah. So in the beginning, in the early days, we started out just by setting up the platform. We purchased some pre-loved garments from brands that we wanted on our platform. So before we even spoke to the brands, we wanted a platform up and running. And it was very gung-ho. We were washing garments in the bathtub. We were buying things off Vestia Collective and eBay. It was very scrappy. We didn't have much budget. We were just doing things ourselves. All I knew was that I had a very clear vision as to what I wanted the brand to be, what I wanted the service to be. I knew who the customer was going to be, and I just wanted to fake it till you make it. And that's very much what we did in those first few months before we even went and spoke to brands. We were just setting up something that looked reasonably legit.
That was my sort of next question, is the challenge for creating a two-sided marketplace, because obviously you need the brands to list the items, and then obviously you need the customers to actually rent them, and neither really works without the other, right? But you kind of answered it really nicely, and I guess people listening, it kind of highlights, because you kind of set one side up yourself, so you kind of took the role of the brands and kind of bought their products yourselves, and as you said, it was very scrappy at first, but it kind of as soon as you can get the people renting it, then you validated that one side works. And now the other side, you just have to sort of you can go to the brands and say, listen, we've got this many people. It's a very easy decision from there on to do it. Starting from scratch, trying both sides at the same time is very challenging.
Completely. That's exactly what we did. So once we had customers on board, we then went to brands and said, listen, this is our brand mix. These are customers, this is who you can access, because fashion rental is a great way to access new customers, great customer acquisition channel. And a lot of these brands are always looking at new ways to reach new markets and new audiences. So it's quite funny. I have a story about Gani, who's one of our largest rental partners at the moment. And we knew that we wanted them on board, so we just bought some of their stuff and slapped it on the website. And a couple of weeks or months later, we got a cease and desist from Gani, a legal letter. And they were like, please do not continue renting out our products without our consent. And we kind of just ignored it.
That doesn't sound like a
We examined, we obviously looked at we looked at the legals and what they sent us, and it was more just a threat. There wasn't actual legal action being taken against us. They just said, we'd rather that you didn't. And anyway, fast forward 2 years later, they are now one of our largest rental partners. So that is just a story to show, challenge the status quo. I mean, don't do anything illegal. That's not what I'm saying. What we were doing was not illegal. It was just
it wasn't.
They just didn't feel comfortable with their brand being positioned in that way. But what we were doing was completely legal because we bought and owned the garments. We could do whatever we wanted with them.
Course.
But then for them then to be our customers and brand partner a couple of years later just shows that we were ahead of the time, and we got it before they did, and eventually they came around to it, and that was very satisfying and exciting to finally have them on board.
Let me ask you this question though, Georgie. It's like how does a brand, this is linking into something else I want to ask you in terms of partnerships, but we'll talk about this now because it's interesting. Like how did they go from like cease and desist of like stop doing this, or we prefer you stop doing this, to becoming a partner? That seems like that just seems really like one end of the spectrum. They're like against it, and now they're like a partner. So how did that come about?
So it was 2 years of hard work and slog. It was us going after every other brand, getting other brands on board, showing UK that there was an alternative way to consume fashion through press, through partnerships, through social media, through working with influencers. We really went hard on every single angle that we could. And fashion brands like to align themselves with other brands. So the way we did it was we had some brands that were adjacent to them, and once we had them on board, then it was easier to get them to agree. And Gani is a very progressive, sustainable fashion brand. They just hadn't come around to it yet. So they're an amazing brand. Honestly, they're one of the most progressive brands in terms of sustainability and their business models. They just hadn't thought about it yet in the UK. We were just we're ahead of time for them.
I want to ask you though, Georgie, like what's been the challenge? So we like covered the two-sided marketplace issue, like the challenge there, and you answered. But like when it comes to sustainable fashion, there are a lot of different brands doing sustainable fashion, and not just sustainable fashion, but just sustainability businesses as a whole. Like my first ever business was in food waste, like redistributing food waste. So I know the challenges when it comes to sustainability. Like what were the sort of challenges that you experienced when it came to growing a sustainable fashion brand?
Yeah, so when we started, our core mission was to make fashion consumption more sustainable. So from the very beginning, we used processes that were more eco-friendly. So for example, we used carbon neutral delivery, we used reusable and recyclable garment bags and boxes, and our laundry partner used wet washing and ozone cleaning, which is better for the environment than dry cleaning. So every point that we could manage and use a more sustainable material or process from the very beginning we did. And I think it's much easier to start out a business doing that than try and retrofit your business with sustainable practices further on down the line. Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, it is a little bit more expensive, and that is something you have to take on the chin immediately. It's not always, the sustainable option is not always the cheapest option, unfortunately. But the larger you get, the better margins you can have with these sustainable products. And I don't regret going at it that way.
So was the biggest challenge, I guess, like the costs when it came to like making sustainable choices, or was it like, were there any friction points when it came to, say, uptake of customers being like, no, I don't want sort of like someone else's clothes or like second clothes? Like, was there any sort of education that you needed to do in terms of growing that side?
Oh yeah, completely. So it's so interesting. Since we started in 2019 to now, the entire industry's attitude, brand and consumer, has changed drastically. So from the consumer side of things in 2019, people still didn't really trust rental. They didn't understand the service. They thought that it would arrive. Would it arrive on time? Would it arrive clean? Is it a bit gross to wear something that somebody else has worn? And we had to do so much education through social media, through influencer work, through our newsletters, educating our customers that this is a seamless, hygienic, great service that will save you money. Like, you don't have to go and buy these £500 garments. You can still access this well-made fashion for a much more affordable price, and it will come to you as good as new. We have really good quality control. So it was basically about building our community and educating our community, and also educating our community not only about our services, but about the wider market shifts and about sustainability in general, and sustainable consumption, and not just about rental, but encouraging people to buy less, buy better. If they need something new, use rental or buy secondhand. Our messaging has always been the best clothing you can ever buy is the one already in your wardrobe. So we're all about consume less but better. So this has been our continual narrative since the beginning. And so we really see ourselves as like an educator for our community in this space.
That's a really good message, because I feel like, or at least when I started my food surplus redistribution brand like a while ago, there was definitely groups in terms of like businesses that were really interested in sustainability, so that they were very easy to sign up. And then I guess from your side, it would be like businesses and individuals that are very interested in making more sustainable choices, but then they're unfortunately not the majority, I would say. So it's like other people you need to educate and things like that. But like when it comes to education at scale, has that been like a challenge, I guess? Because obviously educating one person is easy, because we can have a conversation like this, but educating, say, tens of thousands, or like, you know, it requires a lot of time, right? Has that been an issue?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a challenge, but that's where we use, for example, our social media, and we do a lot of this education through social media. So we share a lot of information about like sustainable books that you should be reading, or like podcasts you should listen to, or documentaries you should listen to, and we really all of our platforms to communicate as widely as possible. And I also just want to say on the sustainability point is that yes, rental is attractive to people who are sustainably minded. Research shows that sustainability is only the third reason why people would rent something or action something. Firstly, it's product and price. So whilst sustainability is brilliant and it's something that every business should be doing in the background, sustainability is not going to sell your product. Like, people good product at the right price. If you're a sustainable product, that can't be it. And so I really believe that every business should just be doing this in the background anyway. In an ideal world, my dream is that there are governmental policies in place where every single business has to take accountability for the end of life of whatever products they're producing, which would encourage businesses to start thinking in a circular way. That absolute dream. If as a brand you produce something, you have to have a solution for it at the end of its life, rather than putting the onus on the customer, which is an enormous pressure on top of everything else for customers to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful point, because I know a lot of people that are listening that want to start a business, and given our generation are very much like impact focused, I would say, Like they are thinking about ideas when it comes to launching a business. And like that business that I talked about, that failed because I focused too much on the sustainability element and not enough around, saving costs for businesses or generating more revenue streams for businesses. And it's like, sustainability, unfortunately, is not enough for you to scale as a business. So if you can build in other things that I know that you're building in, such as, I mean, you literally referenced at the beginning where like they're generating new revenue streams as a brand and accessing new markets and stuff like that, that's when it becomes really exciting.
Completely, and that is really where we're focusing our efforts. Is we're showing brands that you can literally generate recurring and new revenue from these garments. I mean, how exciting that a brand can potentially create one garment. It costs them X, but they can continually make money over and over again from this one garment. It makes so much sense. So we really have to drive that point home with brands. And then from the consumer side of things, we just have to have great product at a great price. Because also consumers are not going to spend too much more just because it's sustainable.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because as a brand, you make more sustainable choices because you want to come across as more sustainable. So as you said, you have to like buy those more expensive items and offset certain things, which obviously cost money as well. But the consumer very rarely does that, which is quite interesting because, I mean, it's not really fault, I would say, because it's like, especially with costs going up and things like that, it's very difficult for them to make sustainable choices when, their money's already struggling anyway.
Completely. I mean, with this cost of living crisis, you can't blame people for making economic decisions over sustainable decisions. People have to look after themselves first and foremost. And that's what economic climate is going to encourage over the next couple of years. So all of your business's sustainable efforts need to be happening in the background and just encourage people to try and think differently, or it's actually just about consuming less.
Yeah.
It truly is. People don't need so much stuff. Honestly, people just need to consume less, and when they are consuming, they need to make better decisions, and that is economically friendly.
Yeah. So for Rotaro right now, like, what's the state of the business, and also, like, what have you seen in terms of like the most sort of fruitful growth channels that you guys have implemented when it came to, because you guys are, so you said 2019, so this is your fourth year now?
Yes. So we are leaning heavily into B2B now. So we have primarily been operating on our B2B2C marketplace platform, but where we really see the opportunity, profitability as well as global reach and impact is directly with fashion brands. So what we're doing is we're developing a B2B SaaS technology that will power brands' rental and resale journey. And that will be a light touch, scalable piece of technology for us so that we don't have to be so operations heavy.
And I mean, I'm guessing as well, like with that, you're not pushing people to your own brand. You're just like taking care of the technology side from that brand.
Yeah.
So it's like, obviously it's operationally and also like marketing and stuff, you don't have to worry about it as much, which is a good thing. But in terms of the existing business right now, you're growing the brand side and the customer side. Like, what's been the biggest growth channels, would you say?
So I think our biggest growth channels are certainly traditional marketing avenues like social media, Google. But something that we've really focused on in the past and going forward is partnerships, because this is a fantastic opportunity to reach new markets, reach new customers. And what we did, this was a really fun exercise that I encourage everyone to do, is partnerships exercise, where you write down all of the brands that align with your values. So firstly, you obviously need to know what your values are as a brand, but then you do an exercise where you're like, okay, if I was a beauty brand, who would we be? They align with all of our values, aesthetically, vibe, target market, and you literally write every single brand that you can think of that you would be if you were a beauty brand. Who would you be if you were an airline? Who would you be if you were a hotel? Who would you be if you were a snack? And that produces a list of 50 brands that align with your values, align with your mission, align with your audience, that you can then go out to and ask for partnerships, because partnerships have been crucial to our growth. Like, we partnered, one of the coolest partnerships we did was with Airbnb, whereby you could rent your holiday home, and then they were also encouraging you to rent your holiday outfit, because going on holiday is one of the most wasteful times in terms of fashion, with people owning garments and wearing them for 1 week and then never looking at them again.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool partnership to do with Airbnb, and we reached so many more customers. We also, for example, partner with Depop, and Depop could technically be considered as one of our competitors because we both do resale of fashion, but we partnered with them and we reached so many a much bigger audience. I really couldn't encourage more.
Well, the question I have for you though, because like these partnerships, so you outline all these different partnerships that you want to do. Like if say you want to operate in this industry, that's a really good exercise to do. When it actually comes to going out there and getting it done and executing on that list, you managed to do like Airbnb, as you mentioned, Tommy Hilfiger, which I saw as well, which is really cool. How did you actually like manage to do those, given that you were such a young brand and also going against the status quo?
Wow, LinkedIn.
Just relentless LinkedIn.
Just honestly, relentless emailing and reaching out on LinkedIn. All I can say is try until you get somewhere. There's no shortcut. I don't have any tips and tricks. It's literally just being on LinkedIn, finding the right person and messaging them with a very compelling message as to why this would be a good partnership. So don't just be like, hey, can we chat? Be like, I think that this would benefit your brand because of X. Be very purposeful about any communication that you have upfront immediately.
Just so people understand the sort of scale to this, because like with my brand, like obviously we do partnerships as well, probably not as heavy as what you guys do in terms of like outreach, but like just so people understand, how many like LinkedIn messages were you doing, how many emails were you sending just on the partnership side before you got, say, Tommy Hilfiger, before you got Airbnb?
Gosh, I don't even know how I'd quantify that. It was years of work. From 2019 to, we did the Airbnb partnership in 2021. So that was 2 years of just building your business and building your brand. And I think once there is a little bit of brand recognition out there and people start to be like, oh yeah, I've heard of you, that makes it much easier, to be honest. And that is just through brand building. It's not, I can't only say it's from cold emailing people. It's also stuff you're doing in the background to build up your brand and the brand recognition. And PR is so important. I can't stress how valuable that's been to our business and the brand awareness and helping us land these partnerships. Because when you email someone and you're like, hey, this is my business, this is what we want to do together, and they've actually heard of you, that really helps. But I have LinkedIn Premium, so I mean, you pay for that so that you can send unlimited messages, because you're going to need them.
Do you factor in within your day, say like messaging a lot of these people, like fashion brands and other sort of on LinkedIn? Like, do you, obviously like LinkedIn Premium helps, but obviously you have to actually spend the time of doing it. So how much sort of time do you allocate towards something like that?
Yeah, so now we have a head of commercial who does this. I would be lying if I said that I was doing all of this right now at this time.
But back in the day, you were
back in the day I was doing absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And I would just schedule a portion of my day to, spend a morning outreaching as much as I could. Because that was all part of the business growth. I needed brands on board. I needed to find the right person within all of those brands, and I needed to get through to them.
Yeah, and this is the difficult thing. Like when I see a lot of people like, oh, I can't be like, it just feels like I'm hitting a dead wall all the time, like brick wall every time. Like I'm just messaging so many people, they're not replying to me. And if they do, like they're just like not interested. So like you must have got a ton of no's before you even got like the first.
Oh yeah, completely. I think I'm immune to no's at this stage. It's just, you can't even take it personally. I don't take no's personally in business and fundraising. You have to have mental self-belief, and you have to truly believe in your business mission to continue going.
So Georgie, I want to wrap up the podcast soon. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I want to see what the next phase of Rotaro is. So what is the next stage for you guys?
So the next phase is really leaning into B2B SaaS tech.
Got you.
Which is truly going to be our future. This way we can really have global reach and increase our scale exponentially. We don't have to only stick in the UK and be restricted by operational limitations. So I'm really excited to bring circularity to as many retail brands as possible. And it doesn't have to be luxury fashion. It can be a homeware brand, it could be a fashion brand, it could be a sports brand. All of these businesses and retailers are thinking about circularity, and I really want to be the go-to circular fashion tech partner for any retailer. So that's where we're headed.
I love that. That's amazing. That's so good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. How can people stay in touch with you and your journey?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Georgie Hyatt. I'm also on TikTok. I don't really post much, but I should. And for Rotaro, we're just Rotaro, Rotaro on Instagram and TikTok.
Got you.
So give us a follow and keep in touch with our journey.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for coming on again. And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat very soon.
Thank you so much.